Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. It is Carlos Alcaraz versus Jannik Sinner in the final that everyone wanted before the Wimbledon draw came out. A replay of the Roland Garros 2025 epic final is going to take place at Wimbledon for 2025. Cannot wait to get into this one. So much to dissect. We're going to try and keep it concise and succinct as always. Before we do get into it though, remember that like button, do subscribe if you're new, and do leave a rating or review if you're listening on a podcast platform. Also, shout out to our members as well on YouTube. Appreciate each and every one of you. Also, remember to leave in the comments who you think is going to win. You can also add why if you'd like, but I'm also interested in your set predictions. Not necessarily if it's 6-3, 6-4, but just if it's going to be straight sets, so 3 sets or 4 or maybe even 5. Okay, so what we're going to do in this video is talk a little about the head-to-head. Then I'm going to talk about what's on the line, so what this could mean if either player were to win. And then we'll talk about their route to the finals and the keys to the match, and ultimately I'll give you guys my prediction. So what's on the line then? So for Jannik, it's quite a few things. A first Wimbledon title, of course. A 4th Grand Slam title. 2-0 head-to-head against Alcaraz on grass at Wimbledon. And then also he'd be the first player to beat Alcaraz in the Grand Slam final. Carlos at the moment is 5-0 or 5-0 as we like to say in the UK. For Carlos, it'd be a 3rd consecutive Wimbledon title, of course. And he'd extend his winning streak over Jannik to 6 matches. He's won the last 5 matches they've played. We'll talk about that in a second in the head-to-head, of course. 6-0 in Grand Slam finals as well if he were to beat Jannik. And then he'd be the 2nd player to defend the Channel Slam after Bjorn Borg. So many things on the line for both players. A lot on the line, as always, when it comes to these types of big matchups in major events. And what's great is that we were really yearning for a Jannik-Carlos Grand Slam final. We have done so for a while now, and they were meeting in semis because of the draws and the seedings, etc. But it's great that we've actually got a Grand Slam final, their first one at Roland Garros, and now they've gone back to back, so showing their dominance. The last 6 slams have been won by one of them, and it's going to be 7 soon. These guys are just, I think, several levels above, as Novak said in his presser post-match. In terms of the head-to-head story even, Carlos leads 8-4. As I mentioned previously, he has won the last 5 matches they've played. They've only played once on grass at Wimbledon in 2022 where Jannik came out on top. And I will reference that a little bit in the keys to the match, but you have to bear in mind that it was 3 years ago, so there have been some big changes in both players' games since. In terms of route to the finals, so for Jannik, he beat Nardi, Vukic, Martinez, Shelton, Djokovic, all in straight sets. But the one match, of course, that has a little question marks around it is the Dimitrov match, that round of 16 match where Dimitrov was 2 sets to love up. The only 2 sets that Jannik's lost in the tournament, and then he had to retire in the 3rd set at 2-2, and Jannik got a walkover. And I think it looked like Dimitrov was going to win. He was playing lights out tennis, arguably the best tennis of his career, maybe even. But Jannik has taken the opportunity with both hands, and Shelton and Djokovic wins were very clinical. For Carlos, he's been struggling a bit more, in honesty. 5-setter against Fognini in the first round, then 3 against Tarvet, so straight sets, then 4 against Struff, 4 against Rublev, straight sets against Norrie, and then 4 against Fritz as well. So it's not been playing saving for him whatsoever. So he's had to really battle through, and the Fritz match was also very competitive. Fritz had set points to take him to the 5th set. He managed to pull something out the bag, 6-4 down that tiebreaker. In terms of keys to the match, so let's very briefly touch upon Wimbledon 2022, and then we'll just talk about the rest of the tactics that might be utilised and what might be key. In that matchup, I think the biggest key was actually the backhand to backhand exchange, or the ad court exchange, I think, to be more specific. Jannik dominated that against Jannik in that matchup, and he was going really hard and fast with the backhand and into out forehand into the Carlos backhand wing. Carlos was having to slice a lot on that wing defensively, really struggling to get a hold in those ad court exchanges. And Jannik essentially dominated the match by dominating that matchup. Since then, Carlos has really shored up his backhand defense for one, and just playing out of that corner, it's been hugely improved. So I don't think we're going to see the same pattern that we did in that 2022 Wimbledon final. Carlos has, I think on paper, Carlos is the favourite because he's won the last two finals, of course, against Novak, and his game, I think, is just slightly more suited to grass, if I'm being honest, with the variety that he possesses, the different options that, if you go and listen to Taylor Fritz's press conference, we talked to him as well, and he mentioned the fact that Carlos just has so many different ways of winning points, whereas with Jannik, he is very consistent and he is extremely good, but he doesn't maybe have the same... He doesn't have the same number of dimensions to his game. That's not to say that he's not as good a player. It's just to say that in terms of variety, he doesn't have as much as Carlos. And at times you can see Carlos struggle with knowing what to do in certain instances, and that could also be a crutch at times. Before I get into the nitty-gritty of the tactics, obviously we know it's going to be a pretty hot day. I asked Carlos about this in the presser, and he essentially said that his game style, like the way that he approaches matches, doesn't really change based on whether it's hotter or colder. I think for Iga, for example, on the women's side, when it's very warm, it definitely suits him more on grass, no doubt. For Carlos, I mean, he's won Wimbledon twice, and the conditions haven't been as hot as this. He's also won tournaments when it's been hot like this, so I think for him, he's just thinking, like, I've got the repertoire to succeed on any surface and any condition. So I think both players will be at their physical best. I know Jannik's got the strapping on the right elbow and the elbow sleeve, but I actually think he looks okay. I don't think he's going to be in any sort of discomfort during the final. He also alluded to that after he was asked a question about it in the presser and said that it feels fine, no issues with it really. I assume it's a preventative measure. The star matchup, look, I mean, I think both have been serving well. They hit 10 plus aces, both players, in their semi-finals. They also won 100% of first serve points won in their first sets of their semi-finals, which is quite an interesting comparison. Carlos played that first set, 12 winners, 3 unforced errors, which was just a flawless set almost. Jannik, I think, was maybe 9. I think it was 9 winners to 6 unforced errors. So, look, I mean, I talked about the ad court exchange. I think that's very even nowadays. On grass, you could argue actually that with the slice that Alcaraz has developed and it's a lot more potent now, he should actually have the advantage in the ad court exchange. Jannik, though, does combat slice really well. He gets low and he rips the forehand off the slice into out, into in. So that's going to be interesting to see how much Carlos utilizes that on grass. Given it's a hotter day, it's not going to zip through as much. It's still pretty potent on grass, but it's not even on a hot day. But I just wonder against Jannik whether it's the right tactic. He'll definitely vary it up, try and disrupt the rhythm of Jannik. That's going to be what Carlos will do, and he does it against all opponents. I don't necessarily think we're going to see him serve and volley a lot. Like we did maybe against Fritz. I know he was doing it against Fritz. I just don't feel like he is going to be as confident to do it on grass against Jannik, who is not going to stand particularly far back. And he's, you could argue at the moment, currently the best returner in the world on current form. So that'll be interesting to see if Carlos throws that in or not, and how often he does actually approach the net. Because against Fritz, he came to the net, I think it was around... I think it was 41 times, which is a lot. That's 10 times each set. For Jannik, we know what he's about. He's going to stick on the baseline. He's going to try and hit through Alcaraz with power. At times, when he needs to be consistent, he'll be consistent. He'll hit hard through the middle and open up the angles with the forehand, which he can hit in different ways now. He can hit with a lot of topspin. He can flatten it. And on the backhand wing as well, he started to add a bit more variety there as well. The slice, I saw him practicing the slice in practice, but didn't really see him utilize it much against Novak. So that'll be interesting to see if he does utilize it against Carlos. Carlos also is very good against the slice. Both of these players are. So it's something that you have to use quite sparingly and in the right moments. And it has to be a pinpoint slice, I think. I think it could really come down to The added layer that Carlos has is the drop shot. Well, the drop shot and the net play, but the net play, I think, obviously comes into play with the drop shot and the lob, etc. That could be the 1-2% that sets Carlos apart. And then actually, if we talk about Carlos in the serve return dynamic, I think Carlos has been serving really well, arguably better than Jannik. But I would say that Jannik's been returning better, so I think it's almost an even matchup there. Now, what's difficult is that the mental side of things. People sometimes will say in the comments how you can't really predict the mental, and it's true, you can't. I just do wonder how much that Roland Garros final plays on both players' minds, and I'm assuming for Carlos, he probably feels like it gives him an edge. For Jannik, it could do the opposite, or I guess it could also give him extra motivation to say, I really want to get over this hump. I've lost to Carlos now the last 5 times. If I can beat him at Wimbledon, where he's reigning champ, after also what happened at Roland Garros, it's a real statement. But I don't necessarily think that's going to be a big factor. I think it's going to come down to a few points, and it could potentially be 5 sets, and we could get an epic. It could only be 4 sets or even 3 tight sets. But at the start of the tournament, I picked Jannik to win. I think the safe pick is Carlos, if I'm being honest, because his game is just so much more suited to these conditions. Sorry, let me rephrase, to this surface. Jannik has all the weapons to win Wimbledon titles. I just think Carlos's game is even more suited than Jannik's. So I'm going to stick to my original gut before the draw, and I'm going to go with Jannik. I'm going to go with Jannik in 5 sets. No, in 5 sets, that's pretty crazy with Carlos's 5-set record. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to Jannik in 5 sets to get over the hump of... No. I think I'm not... You know what? I'm going to go Jannik in 4. Jannik in 4 sets. Yeah, let me know in the comment section below what you think and why. I feel like Carlos in 4 is probably going to be the most popular pick, but let me know what you guys think. Thanks very much, guys. Stay safe and we'll see you on the next video.